Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We broadcast 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time, tape delayed throughout the world. Telephone listen line is up and running. You can listen 24/7 to USA Prepares, 605-477-3249. The call-in line is 866-582-9933. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Really well, and I had a question that you are the person to ask. And here's the question. You are in Australia. You've lived in Australia and New Zealand. I would say most, if not all, of your life. Is that right?
I've lived here since I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
So
and how about New Zealand?
I'm now 44 years old, so yeah, it's a fair whack of my life.
Mm-hmm. And
I
you've been
in New Zealand.
Guineith, you'll have to speak really closely into your telephone, please.
How's that? Is that better?
A little bit, yes. Okay,
yeah.
So you have been a subject of royalty since birth, correct?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So here's the question. I've been thinking about this for a while. The kings, and I was thinking way back to the times of the Vikings, the Nords invading England. And the kings in England had to make decisions. They had to make decisions as to whether they were going to enter battle. They had to make decisions as to where the battles would be best fought to their advantage, what kinds of weapons. Also, who was going to die in these battles, who they would put at what positions. So there are a lot of decisions that the kings made with respect to the lives of other people, including the lives of their own family, should a family member fall out of line and maybe not be as loyal as he should be, according to the king's way of thinking. So sometimes even those family members were casualties of royalty. Is that correct?
Well, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It was fairly common for kings and queens of England to decide that they had just had too many relatives and that some of their relatives needed to die. Mm-hmm. And in which case then the relatives usually were either forced to flee into exile if they got word of it, or they, died. They were arrested, usually on trumped-up charges, fake lawsuits, and would happen, and they'd usually be charged with treason and executed.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that leads me to the next line of thinking, that is, if royalty had done that, why would it be any different today? Why? And I'm talking about royalty today, and I'm talking about, other places, like the United States and other countries. So if people get in the way, I believe they get killed, murdered. I believe if a country wants to expand or take territory or take natural resources and they feel that they can get away with it, they just do it. And so I don't think much has changed since the days of the Vikings. I'm talking about 900 A.D. I don't think much has changed. What are your thoughts?
I really don't think much has changed either, except that now people are more aware of these schemes, and knowledge is power, and they're a bit less inclined to just go and bend the knee and roll over and die than they were in previous ages.
Which is kind of like what's happening in Hong Kong right now.
Yeah. Yep. That is about the sum of it. The people in Hong Kong, they, over 100 years ago, they were a part of China, okay? But that's a lot of water under the bridge in the last 100 years in China. And, in that 100 years, Hong Kong took a different course, and they got it, they lived for about 100 years under British common law, which actually gave them a great deal of freedom. And they had the opportunity to develop commerce and industry. At the very same time, their friends and family members in mainland China were sinking under communist dictatorship. And, that was, first of all, under Chairman Mao and then under various other Chinese dictators. China has always been ruled by dictators of one sort or another. But the Chinese people have always had a fantastic sense of capitalism and commerce. And they've always been very, very industrious people. They're like ants. They set the rest of the world to shame with regards to their commerce and industry. They really do. But, the Hong Kong people, they had the opportunity for that instinct to really flourish because they didn't have a dictator or a king directly over them. Yes, they had the queen, and then they had, the various other kings and queens that were in the last 100 years or 120 years or whatever. But they had, that was on the other side of the world, if that makes sense. Yeah. So they had an opportunity to flourish more or less anarchistically for over 100 years, and now they're not inclined to just roll over and go under a communist dictatorship again, because they've had a chance of ruling themselves. They actually did really well, became fabulously wealthy, and they're just not going to give it all away. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does, and I'm with them. As a matter of fact, there are a few of us in the United States who think that we can control our own destiny, that we can make our own decisions, that we can do the right thing, that we can help each other. And there are those who want to suppress that and tell us what to do. And so some of us, just like those in Hong Kong, don't like it and don't like being told what to do. And it's not like everyone's a criminal and they have to be under the thumb of the rulers. It's not like that. There are some people who actually are productive and really don't need all of that pressure and oppression in order to do the right thing. So I was just wanted to talk to you about that because I thought you'd be the person to answer that question. And then, of course, that leads us to the next question. So why is it that people look at royalty as, wow, these guys are they are worth supporting. They are worth giving cars and allowances and these great big castles and land tracts. They're just wonderful. But in reality, the lineage was of murder and mayhem and war and destruction and disease and famine and pilfering and highway robbery and robbery on the seas. The crimes that were committed by, we'll call them the government, we'll call it royalty, and it's not just England, it's all over. Why do people put up with that? Why do they think that, if you meet somebody from London, they think the Queen just walks on water. Charles just walks on water. The royal family is the be-all, end-all, and boy, it's so great to support them and give them our money. Why?
Well, I used to think like that. I really, really did. But as time has gone on, I'm less and less inclined to think like that because I'm realizing it's a one-way street and the traffic ain't going in my direction. Because historically in England, the queens and kings were often brutal to their own people, but there were other kings and other queens and other governments elsewhere that were constantly threatening to invade, and if they did, they would literally go from place to place, from village to village, wiping out whole communities, So, one of the reasons why the English put up with their kings and queens is because they kept the kings and queens of France and Germany, the Vikings, and various other places at bay. Okay? And, for example, I was actually watching an anime cartoon this evening, and it was about, it was set in the days of the Vikings, about how King Harold, the first king of Norway, went from place to place, looting and pillaging and raping and murdering together with his men. And it was about this little village in Iceland who didn't want anything to do with King Harold, had been driven out by King Harold, and now they were living up in the far north Arctic. And, there was this other guy who was also a Viking living across the way, and now they were getting driven further west still, okay? And eventually they do end up in America, which the Vikings did end up in America. But what stopped King Harold was was the King of England, okay? He went and he attempted to invade England, and he was killed by the King of England. And if the King of England hadn't killed King Harold, the King of the Vikings, then, King Harold would have killed probably a large proportion of the English population, and we would all be speaking a dialect of Old Norse right now instead of an old dialect of Old Saxon. That's the truth of it, So that was the purpose of royalty in the old days, was to actually protect their own people. They were supposed to protect their own people. They weren't supposed to kill their own people. But often they ended up killing their own people. And that was tremendously sad. But usually the damage that an invading army would do would be much worse than the damage that their own people would do to themselves. If that makes sense.
It does. And the English and the French and the Vikings all had weapons of war. They would invade each other. There was revenge after revenge after revenge, and a lot of people died. I mean, a lot of people, needlessly. So instead of discussing and talking and trying to figure out a better way, it was done with the sword, flaming arrows, maces, balls and chains, dungeons, torture, etc. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and we're talking about kings and royalty and battles and war, and that leads us to Princess Diana. Now, Princess Diana of Wales was pretty tall. She was 5'10", just 2 inches shorter than you, Guineith. And now, but she was a descendant of royalty. From my research, she was part of the British aristocracy. She was a descendant from King Charles II, and her lineage traces to, well, she was related to Winston Churchill, George Washington, John Adams, John Quincy Adams, Millard Fillmore, Calvin Coolidge, Grover Cleveland, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Rutherford B. Hayes, also known as Rutherford B. Hayes, and both Presidents Bush. So she was related to some very famous people, and yet many of us believe that she was murdered. And why? There are a couple thoughts about that. One thing is that Diana was very visible in the campaign to ban landmines. And when she divorced Charles, that settlement included a lump sum of $22.5 million plus an annual income of $600,000 a year. So that's what it cost to support her after the divorce, the settlement of $22.5 million plus $600,000 a year. So there was really something to this, and the question is, where'd that $22.5 million come from, and where did that $600,000 a year come from that she would get to run her office, if you will? So that's a lot of money involved. And I don't think people realize that, especially the English, that there's that much money floating around. A divorce settlement of $22.5 million? Where did it come from? Your thoughts on that?
The British royal family is one of the wealthiest families in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, probably more or less pocket change, actually, to the amount of wealth that they really have. And I think that it's quite interesting what you were mentioning about that she is descended from Charles II, because you'll never guess who I was thinking of. I was taking this eye during the commercial break. Charles II. Okay. I absolutely believe that Princess Diana was murdered. And my family is, my mother's mother was friends with the Queen Mother when they were young women together in England, because my grandmother was the granddaughter of the Earl of Lindsay, who was neighbours with Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, okay, when she was a young woman. And, this is all almost 100 years ago now that this was happening. But, the Queen Mother was a lovely lady. But Charles II, oh my gosh, I was actually going to mention this, okay? I think that what I'm about to say will pretty well sum it up in a nutshell. If you go back into that era of history in Charles II's day, okay, Charles II was very nearly not even the king, because he was, his army was sorely defeated by the army of Oliver Cromwell at the Battle of Worcester, to the point of where most of his soldiers were wiped out. And the only reason that Prince Charles, who became Charles II, even survived was because he was kidnapped off the battlefield by a friend of his, who was your friendly neighbourhood highwayman, whose name was called Captain James Hind. And I would like to go into the story.
Yeah,
because I think this actually explains a lot, but I can hear music.
Yeah, hold that thought. We'll be right back. We've been talking about royalty with Guineith Isaacs, and we've been talking about Diana, we've been talking about Charles II, Oliver Cromwell, and we've been talking about the kidnapping. Please continue, Guineith, about the kidnapping.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Now, Prince Charles, who would become King Charles II, was kidnapped off the battlefield of the Battle of Worcester by Captain James Hind, who was a highwayman, but he was a royalist highwayman, and he spent his days accosting parliamentary coaches, okay? England was in the midst of a civil war, And I should mention that I was alive in that day in a previous incarnation, and I was also a highwaywoman by the name of Lady Catherine Ferrers. And, so I was there, and from time to time I have past life memories in dreams or in flashes of those days. And, but what happened was he was transported to a waiting French ship with, whisked off to France, and Oliver Cromwell was very, very angry at this highwayman. And later on, when this particular highwayman, James Hind, accosted Oliver Cromwell's coach with his gang, Oliver Cromwell had almost his entire gang, together with his partner, Thomas Allen, arrested and hung, drawn, and quartered. And at that time, James Hind escaped and disappeared into obscurity to his old haunts in the poorer parts of London. But he was actually recognised by a former friend of his who dobbed him in to the Speaker of the House of Commons. And James Hind was arrested and charged with treason and sent to Worcester Racecourse, where he was also hung, drawn, and quartered, which was a particular British punishment that was specially reserved for those who had committed treason. Now, what it was that, the Charles I was not a very wise king. He sent the country into deficit, basically through profligate spending. He liked to throw parties. And so Oliver Cromwell, and besides which he was a Catholic as well, Oliver Cromwell was a Puritan, and so he was a Protestant, and so he didn't like the fact that the king was spending all the money, and so he and some of his friends got together and had the king arrested and beheaded and appointed himself Lord High Protector of England. But then he ended up being an even worse ruler than Charles I had ever been, not on account of his of excessive spending, but on account of just bad financial management and excessive taxation. And it got to the point, I think I mentioned in a previous broadcast, that Cromwell was even taxing windows and chimney pots. So he would tax you on account of the number of fireplaces you have in your house and on account of the number of windows. And he actually drove a number of these royal noble families broke through taxation. And that's why many of the nobles became highwaymen. They became highwaymen just to pay their bills. And that's the truth of it. It's always been a mess, but the reason why the English are so reluctant to go to being a republic, okay, is because they instinctively remember the days of Oliver Cromwell. They remember that it was even worse without a king than it was with a king, and so they have chosen to stick with the king model of rulership, with the king model, the royalty model of government. Because they, during the days of Oliver Cromwell, you couldn't travel 5 miles without the risk to life and limb of you being robbed by some highwayman, such as myself, or in that day, back in the days of the English Civil War, or the likes of James Hind, or the likes of any one of hundreds of highwaymen at the time. Basically, Britain getting rid of its king resulted in a descent of the whole country into a without rule of law situation. That's basically it. And that's why the English have been so reluctant ever since, no matter how badly behaved their kings and queens have been, to get rid of the kings and queens, because they remember what it was like under Cromwell. But he was basically a Jacobin, which was kind of like a communist. Okay, but they didn't have the word communist at the time. But if you look at what the Jacobins believed, it was basically communism. This is why they don't want to get rid of their king and queen. And it's something that absolutely baffles Americans, because Americans managed to get rid of the king, and it worked in America, because you had this thing called the Constitution that you established at that time, and what it did was it reestablished all of your rights that you had under the Magna Carta. Now, there's nothing wrong with the British government. They just need to start ruling it according to the Magna Carta, which they haven't been doing for hundreds and hundreds of years. And if they don't start doing it now, they will go under Sharia law, because the Muslims are moving in and they are taking over. And it's because of the profligacy, the corruption, the pedophilia, the disenchantment with the, British royal family by the English people, but their fear of letting it go for what might lie ahead in a without rule of law situation, without a king or a queen being there. But the thing is they're heading into without rule of law anyway, as the treatment of people like Julian Assange and Tommy Robinson clearly demonstrates. They're heading into without rule of law. Okay? There's no justice there. I've got friends in England, and they say it's horrible. You know? They try and stay out of the cities. They live, actually, some of my friends live in Hertfordshire, near Lady Catherine's old stomping ground. And they say that it's the best place in the whole world, because now, as then, it's not really a very friendly place for people who want to dominate people. It's a place where there's really a great deal of freedom, okay, because there are so many tiny little out-of-the-way villages, and some of these villages can only be reached on foot, you know, or they have one tiny little dirt track into the village, and the village might have 10 houses in it. And this is like only maybe 80 miles from London. And but it's a situation that's probably the best place to be in what is emerging in this situation, and that's why my friends have moved there or live there. You know, but that's what it's like. And I hope I can explain to the Americans why the English are so frightened of getting rid of their king and queen. They are frightened of the without rule of law situation that could develop as a result. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I wanted to share with our class, you mentioned taxation on windows and chimney pots. And class, a chimney pot is that terracotta extension on the top of the chimney. And the purpose of it is to increase the amount of draft by increasing the height of the chimney. And it was an relatively inexpensive way of adding height to a chimney. So these could be, 2, 3, 4 feet tall, made out of orange terracotta clay. They're decorative, and they were functional. So what Guineith is saying is it's really easy to tax. Just count up the number of windows and count up the number of chimney pots to apply additional taxation. There's something that's quite interesting that I've learned, and that is that Princess Diana was related to, 4 of her ancestors were mistresses to British kings. So she was very pretty, and I can assume that the mistresses that were her ancestors were very pretty as well, and they were the mistresses of British kings. So there's a history there with Diana and the ruling of England. Were you aware of that?
Really
that
interesting. I would be really interested to investigate and do a past life analysis of Princess Diana. Unfortunately, she's not here. Mm-hmm. She has met with me in a dream at one time. She said the Queen is old and ill, and Will needs to prepare himself to be king. So, Prince William, if you are listening to this broadcast, or if you ever hear it at any time, you need to prepare yourself to be king, because you are going to be king one day. And I'm not sure that Charles will ever be king. He strikes me as being very weak. He strikes me as vampiric in his outlook on life. But at the same time, he would rather paint watercolours and keep Berkshire pigs. He's a real strange kettle of fish, that one, Prince Charles. And yet at the same time, he's very proud of the fact that Vlad Dracul, the historic Count Dracula, was actually one of his ancestors on the direct male line. And he's bought Dracula's castle in Transylvania, and he lived there for half a year.
Well, when we talk about royalty, some other things that are interesting, and Prince Harry's engagement and marriage to Markle is quite the anomaly, I would think, because her father is white, her mother is black, and I don't think that's ever happened before, has it?
I don't. I think it might have back in the days of King Solomon with the Queen of Sheba, but I don't think it's happened since.
Yeah. Can we talk about why? Can you enlighten us when we come back from this break as to why this might have happened? And it happened very, very quickly. There's a quote from Meghan Markle, and she was asked, where are your parents from? And here's the quote. Quote, while I could say Pennsylvania and Ohio, and to continue this proverbial two-step, I instead give them what they're after. My dad is Caucasian and my mom is African American. I'm half black and half white, according to Meghan Markle in this article on heavy.com. So how did that happen, that the tradition of being of white ancestry just so quickly changed? What do you think happened?
Well, I think that there's a few factors that played into this. I think that I think that Prince Harry's chances now of ever becoming the king are fairly remote, because Prince William is married, has a couple of children himself, and so he's probably about fourth in line to the throne. Probably, if when William becomes king, he will be fourth in line to the throne. Okay, so at the moment he's about sixth or seventh in line, but he's going to be fourth when his brother is the king. But I think that everybody realizes that he's not really the son of Prince Charles, so it really doesn't matter as much as it would. I think that everybody who has a brain in their head realizes that he's the son of James Hewitt, the polo player, and he's not really the son of Prince Charles. But Prince Charles has accepted him as his son, but he looks nothing like Prince Charles. He's Prince William. He really does. You can tell really that Prince William is the son of Prince Charles, but James Hewitt is obviously, with his physical features, the father of Prince Harry. And I think that's, that's the worst kept secret in the whole royal family. But once again, getting into the past life thing, I was musing on this as I was, once again stoking my fire during the ads. And I've believed for quite some time that Prince Harry is actually the reincarnation of King Henry VIII, because there is such a strong physical resemblance between Henry VIII and Prince Harry. He's the spitting image of him. And I'm thinking that Meghan Markle might possibly be the reincarnation of one of Henry VIII's 5 wives. And I don't have their photos in front of me, but I'm thinking probably if you want to look up on the internet the 5 wives of Henry VIII, you'll be able to see pictures of them all and just see if there's any of them that strongly resemble Meghan Markle in the bones and in the facial structure. Because I'm thinking, just off the top of my head, because I don't have the internet in front of me, probably Catherine Howard. That this is actually a past life connection that he has with Meghan Markle. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to get divorced in 5 years' time, because that's exactly what happened with Henry VIII too. He divorced a few of his wives, beheaded others of them. But from my historical recollection, Catherine Howard was the wife that really stole his heart and that he really truly fell in love with. So if you just want, and just give me your opinion.
I'm there. I'm looking at the wives, and Aragon, is that one of them? Boleyn, another one. Seymour.
Yeah.
Clevis, Howard, and Parr. And I would have to leave that up to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm not the person to figure out which one of these looks closest, but you know what? There is a resemblance there. Yes. Yeah, especially between if you get a painting of a young Henry VIII, before he began to pile the weight on, you will see that there's a very, very strong physical resemblance between Henry VIII and Prince Harry. And even to the fact that actually his name is not Harry, it's Henry. People just call him Harry. People forget that his name is actually Henry. How's that? What a great...
People tend to incarnate back into the same life that they have had in previous lifetimes, and they tend to reincarnate in soul groups. And I think that this is why, for whatever reason, it's on a karmic level, not on any physical level, and that's why the rules have been bent on this occasion, because other members of the royal family sense it as well on a psychic level.
And very quickly, the 6 wives, one was divorced, one was beheaded, another one died, another one was divorced, another one was beheaded, and one survived. We'll be right back after top of the hour news and commercial announcements. Guineith Isaacs has a lot more information to share with us. Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. And, Klaus, I want you to know that none of this was planned. I just went off on a wild tangent and asked Guineith about royalty, and she's got the answers. So this was all spontaneous. Guineith, just as a little bit of a follow-up, it seems to me that Harold and Meghan are living a whirlwind, fantastic, carefree lifestyle, spending money as if they own the printing press. Is that your view as well, or are they carrying on frivolously, carelessly, as if, you know what, we're not going to sit at the head of the monarchy, so who cares? We'll just spend it and enjoy it. That's kind of what I see. Do you see that as well?
I would tend to agree. And I think that most members of the royal family who know that they're not going to, ever really have any of the responsibility of ever being, on the throne or the second in command or whatever, I think that they tend to live like that, and I think that it is, I do think it is fairly irresponsible because there's a lot of people suffering, and when they see this sort of frivolousness, it makes them feel a bit bitter. And
Absolutely.
when you're heading into this type of era of history that we're heading into, where there's so much suffering, and I sent an email a bit earlier about some of the suffering that some of my friends are experiencing, it makes them feel like they don't want to have the royalty anymore. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Oh, it absolutely does. And I look at the extravagance and the excess and the cavalier attitudes of those alleged representatives in the United States, and it frosts me as well. And I look at the farmers class. The average farm debt right here, right now in the United States is $1,300,000. And the farmers can't pay it back. They can't pay it back because the crops aren't growing, because they're flooded. We're having environmental disaster after disaster. And so the small farms, $1.3 million may seem like a lot of money, but when it comes to farming, it takes a lot of money. So think about the average business. How much equipment does a business have? Well, think about tractors and trucks and hay equipment and all the implements that are necessary, and the fuel and the tanks and the land and the taxes and the buildings and all that. You put that together, $1.3 million doesn't go very far. And that's what the average debt of the American farmer is right now, and many just flat out can't pay it back. And then, of course, there are government subsidies, but the government subsidies don't, it's not even hardly measurable, the government subsidies. And lending the farmers more money, how's that going to help? It's not going to help. Taking a guy who's further into debt or a family that's further into debt and giving him more debt, that's going to make it better? I don't think so. So, Guineith, you're talking about some of those close to you. What are they experiencing? Because from what I saw, we're talking about lack of food.
Yep, that's right. I went on to Facebook this afternoon, and I had two of my Facebook friends within half an hour. Now, these are people that I'm in regular communication with on Facebook. I would consider them to be my friends in real life, although I've never met them. Just as I would consider you to be my friend in real life, although I've never met you. Okay? So they're not just random people that I know on Facebook or that I've, friended, quote unquote, on Facebook. These are people that I'm actually in regular communication with, who have heard of me through my show, or who I've found sites that, on Facebook or off Facebook that I like, and I begin emailing them, and I establish a friendship with them, communication. So these people, that I had two of them within about half an hour, communicate that they were having trouble feeding themselves, that they were having to choose who to feed, okay? One was a woman, and she was saying that she was getting depressed, and because she couldn't afford to feed herself and her 7-year-old son. And obviously I'm not going to name names, okay? There's how many? 2 billion people out there on Facebook, okay? And there was another man, and he had to make the decision of whether he was going to feed himself or his dog. And this week he chose to feed his dog instead of himself. And these are not ignorant social justice warrior type friends. I don't tend to have such people as my friends on Facebook. or in real life, actually. So these are really with it people, and yet they are struggling. How are the people faring who don't have a clue? I don't know. I don't know how these people are faring who don't have a clue what's going on in the world. I don't, who maybe have a low-level mental illness or maybe a high-level mental illness. I don't know how they're doing. But I know that two people that I know fairly well having trouble feeding them and theirs is a bit of a heads up. I don't know how many other people there are out there, because it's not something that people tend to talk about, because they're frightened. They're frightened that, CPS or the dog ranger or somebody might try to, quote-unquote, help them. But such people don't need government help. You know what I mean by government help, don't you, Vincent? The sort of
it's like when the sheriff, that's when the sheriff shows up with 3 of his deputies, and they're here to help you. Yeah, I know what that means.
Yeah.
Or when someone is traveling down the road behind the wheel, and then there's a lights and sirens flashing behind him, and then there's one in front of him, and then there's one alongside him, and then there's 2 more, because that's help.
They're all there to help.
Right.
Right. I'm being sarcastic here,
Me too.
But people don't want to talk about this, so the problem is remaining hidden. Okay, because I'm telling everybody that I know, whatever you do, put a vegetable garden in. Go and buy some seeds. Each week when your check comes in, go and buy some seeds or a punnet of seedlings and figure out how to garden and do it now. Okay? If you've got a bit more money one week, go and buy a fruit tree in season, So if, figure out whatever the season is for you to plant fruit trees where you are. And when that season comes around, each week or each fortnight when your check comes in, go and buy a fruit tree and figure out how to look after it. Go and buy a packet of seeds or a punnet of seedlings, figure out what grows when, and there's only one way to learn how to do that, and that's to actually go and do it. Because otherwise, you're going to starve. And what else you need to do, you need to learn about wild food. You need to learn about what foods are edible in the forest where you are. And if there's particular foods that you can eat that need substantial processing, learn how to do the processing, And if it's a wild crafted food, it might taste disgusting the first 5 times you eat it. But if it's not poisonous, it won't kill you, and it may actually keep you alive. Like, for example, not a lot of people know that acorns from an oak tree are edible, but you have to boil them and then crush them and then boil them again and then throw out that lot of water and then boil them again. And once you've boiled them 3 times, then you can eat the flesh of the acorns. But you've got to boil them 3 times. It's a lot of work. And I don't know, I've never done it. It's an acquired taste, I've heard. But if you don't boil them 3 times, they're quite poisonous because they're full of tannin. Which, incidentally, if you're into hunting and tanning skins, you can actually use the tannin from acorns to tan skins. Okay, so otherwise, if you're not into tanning, well, just, you could use it for dyeing cloth or various other purposes. But you can eat the flesh of acorns. Not a lot of people know that. You can also feed them to pigs, raw, and the pigs will happily eat them. So if you've got an oak forest surrounding you, go and collect the acorns and go and buy some pigs. It just takes a bit of creative thinking. But most people are not like that, and 90% of the people out there are not going to be alive in 10 years. I believe that. I really believe that, because it is going down to the wire. Really now it is. These are desperate times. And I think that we all need to be really clever. You need to figure out what plants are growing around you are edible, especially roots, because leaf crops, they will provide you with nutrition, but they won't fill you up, okay? So, and there's some plants you can eat the whole plant. There's other plants you can only eat certain parts of the plant. And you've got to do your research, and you've got to find out what these plants are and what processing you need to do on them, or whether you can just pull them up out of the ground and eat them.
Here's an example. Yeah, yes, it does. Here's an example. People who live in urban settings or just outside the cities, there are all kinds of pressures to have a nice little tiny lawn. And these people may, just outside the city, in suburbia, we'll call it, you might have a quarter of an acre, an eighth of an acre, a half an acre, maybe even an acre. And there's competition to have a really nice lawn. And you certainly don't want to have any of those yellow flowered dandelions, right? So people will apply a fertilizer with a dandelion killer built in to kill those dandelions. However, everything from the flower all the way down to the roots of a dandelion is edible. Yep.
The whole plant.
The whole plant. But,
yep.
You know, we don't like them, so, I don't mean we, I mean, you know, some people in the cities and in the suburbs. And on our farm, if the cows will eat it, it's not a weed. If the cows will eat it, we want it. It doesn't matter what it is. As a matter of fact, I'm actually trying to grow more dandelions. And crabgrass. Oh, you can't have crabgrass, right? It's great for cows. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us. And she's in Australia, live in Australia. So we are probably the only broadcast that has a regular correspondent in Australia. And I really am thankful for that. Class, I mentioned that farm debt, the average farm debt in the United States is $1,300,000. And I want to tell you a quick story, and I'd love to hear Gwen's comments. So there's this Minnesota farmer, actually there are two of them, Liz and Bob Craddock. And they went to mediation to talk with their creditors. So they owe $1,300,000, roughly. And they had to have a face-to-face meeting with the people to who they owe money. Well, one guy was a guy named Dell, and he's the mechanic. They owe him $28,000, and they can't pay him. So what does that mean to Dell? Well, Dell has a son, and he wants to help his son buy a home. What parent doesn't want to help their child, get started? Well, Dell the mechanic can't do it because the farmers owe Dell $28,000. Then there's this other guy, Steve, and Steve is the feed store guy. He's 64 years old. He wants to retire, but he can't. He can't because the farmers owe him $311,000. So he has to keep working. And then the government comes in and says, tell you what, we're going to make everything good. We're going to give you $12,000. So they receive a check for $12,000 from the federal government, and they're glad to get it. But how much of a dent is that $12,000 going to make when you spread it around and you owe $1,300,000? One guy you owe $311,000 to, another guy $28,000, and you get a check from the government. Here, we're here to help. $12,000. So the government has been messing around with climate manipulation, geoengineering, weather manipulation, and it's destroying the ability for the American farmer to raise food. Now, the rich are always going to be able to get food. So if beef goes to $100 a pound, what's that to like a Bill Gates? Does it really matter? Does he even know? I'll bet you Bill Gates doesn't know the price of milk in the food store. I'll bet you he doesn't. So you look at Zuckerberg, right? He has so much money. How is this going to affect them? It's not. It's only going to affect the little people, the bottom 93%. So we're having a real tough time trading with China. They have found that they can build infrastructure and find food from other places in the world. They don't need ours. And once you find another source, you typically don't go back. So, for example, there's a little town about 20 miles away from us. And that's where they have a bank there. It's the closest bank. And the mayor of this little tiny hamlet, this nothing of a hamlet, decided to put out a part-time police guy and a part-time radar gun and a part-time police car, and this guy would snipe with his radar gun and give people tickets. So what happened? People like me stopped going to that town. I don't buy gas there. I don't buy hardware there. I don't get my tires fixed there anymore. I don't go there. I hardly go to the bank. Hardly. And I really have to want to do it because it's over it's a 40-mile round trip. And I talked to the guy who owns a tire shop there. He owns an automotive repair shop and tire shop. And I said, so how's this going? He said, well, Vin, my customers have left. They don't want to be victims of this out-of-control part-time cop with a part-time radar gun and a part-time patrol car. They don't want to be a victim. So they don't come here anymore. And I said, are they coming back? And he said, no. They already found other tire shops. They found other hardware stores. They found other places where they're doing business, and they're not coming back.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening to the American farmer with China. China's not coming back. We'll be right back with Guineith Isaacs right after these few announcements and bottom of the hour news. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Guineith. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and we've been talking about they're not coming back. They're not coming back, meaning the customers, once they find another venue, another merchant, another store, another location, they don't want to come back. And that's happening to the buyers of farm products. They found other sources. Guineith, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that sheriff has destroyed his own town through his little highwayman cartel. I think that selfish doesn't even begin to cover it. You know? Mm-hmm. But I think that, in a systemic collapse, I think that the locals where he is might be looking to... I don't wish any harm. I don't even know this guy, by the way, okay? But I'm just saying that I think that the locals just given my knowledge of politics, where he is might be looking for a good supply of rope and a nice strong tree.
Well, I think the damage is done. I think they got rid of him. And there's a little town next to us, 8 miles away in Virginia when we lived there, a decade and a half ago. The same thing happened. New mayor was going to show everybody that she was boss. Hired a part-time cop, part-time police car, part-time radar gun, and anyone doing 26 miles an hour through his town got a ticket. And so many people were sick of it, they found a road around the town. They don't go through the town anymore. They don't buy gas there. They don't buy hardware there. They don't go to the drugstore. They don't get the haircut there. The town died. The town died. The doctor gave up. He left. Pharmacy gave up. Hardware store gave up. Gas station gave up. Dress store gave up. They gave up. Now it's a ghost town. And it's not coming back. Why would it come back? Because the people who used to shop there now shop at Walmart. They go elsewhere. And here's an interesting thing. There's a story that I was reading on radio. It's WCBS 880radio.com. New York City. The New York Police Department is very concerned. They've had their 8th suicide this year. So we're in the 8th month, 8 suicides, 1 per month. That's a lot. Even with a 35,000 member department, those are the ones that they're admitting are suicides. So the first question that came to my mind, I don't know this guy who took his life. It's sad when people do that. It really is. But he must have been at the end of his wits. That's it. Can't take it anymore. Now, the question is, was it financial pressure? Was it health pressure? Was it family pressure? Was he involved in so many things that were going to catch up to him? Maybe he was, involved in bribery somehow. I mean, I don't know. And I'm not speaking ill of the dead because I don't know this guy and I haven't mentioned his name. But you have to wonder. And in the research that I've done about Prohibition, the 18th Amendment, a lot of money was made. A lot of money was made by making it illegal to sell alcoholic beverages. So once that happened, the price went up. Speakeasies were all over. People were having a great time buying what was once legal the day before, then illegal the next day. So Prohibition boosted the payrolls of a lot of people. Most of the police in New York City and Chicago were on the take. They were being paid by the bootleggers. They were on the payroll. I'm talking about the assistant district attorney types, the city hall, the police department. Pretty much everybody was on the take, looking the other way, because they got paid for it. And so you've got to wonder, did that stop when Prohibition stopped, or did that continue? We all know it continued. So it's sad that this guy took his life, whoever he is, but this is indicative of what's going on. And during the first Great Depression, not the one we're in now, but the first one, when I started around 1929, there was so much money being made the years before that it was endless, and all of a sudden it stopped. And people lost their investments. They went from living high on the hog to being absolutely flat out broke and in debt. And what they do? They jumped out windows and killed themselves because they couldn't take the financial pressure. I think we're going to see more of that. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. Any comments on that, Gwyneth?
Unfortunately, I think you're right, Vincent. And, I would like to segue here into the Jeffrey Epstein thing. I think that it's blindingly apparent to every man and his dog that Jeffrey Epstein did not commit suicide. I think that's the worst kept secret in just about the whole of American history now. Even Alex Jones was mentioning that he got on a flight the day after Jeffrey Epstein died, and he found himself with a couple of Democrats on the plane, and they were saying, "Yay, Hillary Clinton murdered Jeffrey Epstein. Yay, I'm glad that here's a woman with some gonads." Except they didn't say gonads, they said something else. That's the sort of woman we need as a president. We need somebody with the guts to pull the trigger and to make the noose and to do away with her enemies, blah, blah, blah. And I was, he was saying this, and, I'm thinking, are these people serious? Not even the Democrats believe that for one thing, not even the Democrats believe that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. Nobody believes it. This dog ain't going to swim. Okay, I believe is an Appalachian saying. But, they're spinning it anyway. And there's a symptom when things really, just before things really start to go south. Every single time in history, the Jacobin, Satanist, Luciferian types begin turning on their own. And they begin killing their own people. And when that starts to happen, you know that the without rule of law situation is pretty darn close. That's just how it is. It happens every time in history. You know, these corrupt police and these corrupt mayors and city officials, they don't even comprehend. They're frightened of us, of you and me. They think that we're going to go out and do something which actually, you know, prior to complete propeller hitting propeller is probably not going to happen, okay? In fact, it's absolutely not going to happen. But they are going to suffer consequences. They're going to suffer consequences from the guy sitting on the desk next to them. Does that make sense, Vincent? They're going to do each other in, and all we have to do is sit back and watch.
Well, that's what we were talking. That's what we were talking about during hour number one. We talked about the Vikings, we talked about the English, we talked about the Kings, and how they choose who lives and dies. So I just went to a search engine, and I happened to just use Google this time. Normally, I use DuckDuckGo. This time I switched to Google, and I typed in the following words. Now listen very carefully, class. Quote, I use these words, quote, did Hillary kill him? I'm going to repeat that. 4 words. Did Hillary kill him? End quote. I never said who, okay? I never said did Hillary kill Epstein or Jeff or anybody. I just said did Hillary kill him? 23,300,000 results.
Oh,
and they all relate to the Clintons. Vince Foster, Seth Rich, Jeffrey Epstein, conspiracies of Jeffrey Epstein. That's what they all relate to. They all relate to the deaths surrounding the Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. What would you call that?
Cartel.
What?
Cartel.
Cartel.
The Clinton cartel.
The Clinton cartel. So try it. Don't believe me, class. Just type in, did Hillary kill him? See what happens. You'll probably get the same 23,300,000 results. So when Guineith and I were talking hour number one about royalty and kings and those rulers, it's been going on for a very long time, Even President Donald Trump is tweeting about the conspiracy and Jeff Epstein. And I think he probably wouldn't say it, but I'm sure he thought it right away. Same thing you're all thinking. So how is it possible that no one monitored him? I mean, the most notorious criminal in the last 25 years, maybe the last 50 years, Jeffrey Epstein, him. And so nobody's watching him. You know that something's wrong, because there would be guards watching guards watching guards watching guards. Everything would be on camera. Duplicate, triplicate, quadruplicate, backed up, every way you can think of. And so the warden has been transferred. The guards have been transferred. Why have they not been arrested? Why? That would be a good start. That would be a good start. Why haven't they been charged and arrested?
Because they're on the take. They're being paid off.
Right.
And they've been given a nice fat check to keep their mouths shut. But they don't.
And what about the first? What about the first trial?
As well.
I don't have the details in front of me, but I remember reading something like that the first judge in the first Epstein trial, where he got off very, very lightly, just died this weekend. Well, he was an old guy. He just died. The class, we've talked about this. We said that it's really a dangerous position to have known Jeffrey Epstein and be involved with him. There's an article on Politico.com, and it says that the judge overseeing key Jeffrey Epstein-related suit died. This was 3/25 of 2019. It goes on to say an elderly federal judge presiding over a key lawsuit relating to financier pedophile Jeffrey Epstein died Sunday, adding another twist to the drawn-out legal saga and efforts to unseal still secret details about the conduct of Jeffrey Epstein, his enablers, and one of his accusers. So that's one article. Another one is that Maxwell told a friend that Epstein's entire island was wired for video. And why would it be wired for video? Well, obviously, video could be used for blackmail, right? So many people, including those of us at USA Prepares, believe that Jeffrey Epstein was an operative who was involved in getting dirt on people, black book data, recording it to be used to influence the behavior of others. So, Jeffrey Epstein, was he this brilliant financier? I don't think so. I think, my personal opinion is I think he was funded by your tax dollars, maybe through inflation, hidden tax dollars, but he was out there, and I think his main job was to get these, ensnare people in prominent positions through the weakness and delight of misbehaving and being sexual predators with young ladies. Guineith, your thoughts?
Well, I think that there's now blood in the water, okay? I think that there are going to be more deaths, and that everybody in that circle is going to descend into a state of paranoia, including and especially Bill and Hillary. Hillary's not well. She's really got something very seriously wrong with her brain. She's still apparently having fits, multiple times per day, epileptic fits. And, she hardly even has her wits about her. She's drugged up to the eyeballs. And one day, very soon, she thinks she's made a pact with the devil, okay? But Hillary Clinton, on the remote chance that you've ever going to listen to this broadcast, which you probably aren't, see that devil sitting at the end of the bed that you have made a pact with a long time ago. One day, very soon, that devil is going to drag you off to hell. And it's going to drag you off to Abaddon. And you are never going to escape. And you are going to be tortured for all eternity. And I don't know, maybe that devil that sits at the end of her bed, who's been waiting to drag her off to hell for all these years, maybe it will, just jump into one of her personal staffers, or one of her friends, or one of her Secret Service people. I don't know, but such things have been known to happen before. Maybe one of her Secret Service people, or one of her personal staffers, or one of her so-called friends will just get so annoyed with her one day, they'll just pull a 9mm out of their purse. And I'm not wishing any harm to Hillary Clinton. I'm just saying this is the sort of thing that's happened in history before. It happened to Julius Caesar. The whole Senate, they all took out a dagger, and they put one dagger each into Julius Caesar. And I could see that, I'm just, hypothesizing here, I can see that possibly the same sort of thing could happen to Hillary.
Yeah, plus we're not recommending any violence here.
By the way,
we're just talking about what happened in. I'm talking about what happened in history.
In history, this sort of thing has happened. Okay, I'm not wishing any harm to Hillary whatsoever.
Yeah, okay? I'm not either.
But we all got to go one day, whether it's by natural causes or whether somebody intervenes.
Well, I certainly wouldn't. I wouldn't cast my vote for her, that's for sure. Nor her husband, nor her daughter. But there's a new term. We didn't make this up. It's called Hillaried. You know, it's like a person could have been Hillaried. That just came up. I mean, within the last week. We didn't make it up.
Oh.
What does that mean? There's lots of thoughts about what that means.
Yep.
And even Epstein. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I said that hardly needs definition.
Yeah.
Except maybe replace the H with a K.
You know,
Hillary.
Well, I've heard that too. I do a lot of reading. A lot of us here at USA Prepares do an extensive amount of reading. And we want to be up on what's happening. But these are very interesting times. And I feel for those who have had any association with Jeffrey Epstein whatsoever, because their lives may be in danger.
They need to have their heads on swivel. Now more than ever.
Guineith, thank you so much for being with us.